Yo, what's up, guys? We're back again. My name's Seba. Me and my friend Jesus are the co-hosts of the Business Kids podcast. Today, we have another episode of our series on Canadian business schools. So we're giving real info and honest reviews of the program from actual students. So today, we're going to talk about Sauder School of Business at UBC with Deep and Karen.
I guess we can start by, first of all, introducing yourselves, what average you got in with, and around what time you received your admission.
Yeah. So here I can start. I'm Deep. I study accounting as well as global supply chain at UBC at Sauder. The admission average. So I did IB, which is like International Baccalaureate, which is like a specific program that high school students take. So I think generally amongst all my classes, I think I had like between a 6 and 7 average. Which translates, if you want to translate into percentage, it's like I think between 92 and 96. I think something like that. Like it's around that range. I will note that Sauders, they do get a lot of applicants just because they are like a pretty prominent business school on the West Coast.
Right.
So a lot of people do have that. Their admission rate is it's competitive.
I got in with basically the same average. I think I got in with a 92. I was mostly actually in science courses because I thought I wanted to go into I was taking like some AP courses, but I was in an IB because that wasn't offered at my school. So I had a mix of like APs and like regular courses. So I took like AP literature, AP physics, just like a couple of those things. And I'm a marketing major, but when you initially go into Sauder, we're all BCom, so we have specializations, but you kind of come out with a BCom. So during the application process, it wouldn't matter what specialization you choose, like coming in from high school. So I also just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. The only caveat to that, I think, just to add a little bit, is Sauder does offer a program which I think is really cool. It's called Bucks, which is like business and science, and so a lot of people from high school that want to sort of have the business knowledge, but also go into do, the comp sci space. They take that on. And so, I think that's a pretty neat program that people do. And I think the admission average, I think for that is slightly higher than I think the BCom.
Okay. One of the big questions we got, and I think is on the minds of a lot of grade 12s applying to business schools, how math intensive is your program? Like if you're not good at math, are you going to struggle or no?
I think that's a good question. I think predominantly, I don't think it was that math intensive. I think because for Sauder students, you have to take a first year math course just so that you're getting your calculus out of the way. But I think overall you can choose whatever specialization you want to go into. So if you're doing something like accounting or finance, which is traditionally a little bit more math heavy, you don't have to. So definitely there are specializations where it's a little bit more theory based and so on. And I think Karen can speak to that from her marketing background.
Yeah, I think coming from a marketing background, I guess I would say the first years, I don't know how it looks at other schools, but I believe we have to take calculus, I think we have 4 courses that would fall under like economics. Like one of them's like government and business, but it's really just an economics course. So you have to take 4 economics course. And then that kind of, you apply some of the pre-calc theory in like some of those courses. And then you have to take 2 accountings is like mandatory in your second year. And you also have to take finance and logistics. So you kind of have to do all the specializations in your first few years. So I would say if you decide not to go into more quant heavy specialization, you still have to go through all of those courses, whether you like it or not. And then afterwards, I can't speak for other specializations. I would say marketing's not too, well, it depends on like what area you go into, because there's like there's like the more data analytics side of marketing, where obviously if you choose that, that's more quant heavy. So it's just kind of what you pick.
Okay, so like I guess you dip your toe in the water in all different types of maths in the first 2 years, and then you decide whether or not you want to stick with it, type of thing.
Exactly.
What year are you guys in? Just so I guess for people to know as well.
Yeah, so I'm in year 5.
Okay.
So I'm coming up for my graduation in May.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the same as Deep.
Okay. So given your experience, what's the difficulty of the program? Do you guys think that it's it's very academically intensive, or do you have leeway to participate in other clubs or things like that.
How many hours per week, if you can give a rough estimate, do you think that you put in?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think that's a question that I had when I was going to university as well. So in terms of like the hours that you're putting in, it is an intensive program. Like getting a BCom anywhere, any school is tough, right? There is sort of this space where you go into first year and you don't necessarily have teachers teaching you and assisting you necessarily the same way as you're used to in high school. So you do have to spend a little bit more time studying. But I'd say that, a lot of if you take, like, say, economic in high school, right? A lot of those fundamental concepts, or even calculus in high school, a lot of those fundamental concepts show up in university again. And so if you're familiar with those, from high school, it's fairly simple to follow along, especially in the first, in Sauder for first year. They do teach you a lot of sort of good sort of business etiquette and business skills and stuff that I think is useful. In terms of the actual hours, I'd say, for each class, you're spending maybe like an extra hour a day or an hour and a half a day on top. So that gives you time to go into, clubs or activities or organization events, which, there are plenty to participate in. So yeah, I think it is intensive, but not to the level where you can't participate externally.
I would say it really depends. Like I would say, because like coming in from school, because I didn't think I was going to go into business, so I genuinely didn't have very good business foundations coming in. Like I took pre-calc, but in hindsight, I think I really wish I had taken calc because it would have made my year so much easier. I definitely feel, for me, I don't know if it was an extra hour, Dave. Maybe I just, I was dying in first year and second year. I was like, oh, this is like hard. But then also I think partially why I spent so long on school is like, I also took on a lot of extracurriculars. Mm-hmm. So I ended up, I think throughout my years, I did like case comps, like intensive case comp programs. I did I co-chaired like a conference. So those things are the stuff that take up the most time, I find. Like right. Sometimes you would be like, those actually eat up more time than your academics, I find. And then obviously if you're dedicating a lot of time to those things, like during your busiest seasons, I guess it could be up to 6 to 9 hours, but that wouldn't be your entire year, right? It would just be hey, before midterms, right before conference, or I have these events coming up that I need to host, then you're putting in 6 to 9 hours. But on top of a school day, which it might be scattered throughout, but if you just do academics in your first 2 years, I genuinely don't think it would be that difficult. I think it's just, if you take on extracurriculars, it will make your year harder for sure, but no regrets. I think that's the right thing to do. Sauder does give good opportunities for you to get involved, and people should.
I think that's one of the things that we forgot to mention for other episodes, but I feel like it applies to all universities. People in high school have to realize that clubs from high school and clubs from university are very, very different. You can be on 4 clubs in high school and have 2 or 3 exec positions, and it's just cool. Okay, you go to a meeting. But being on a club in university is it's a pretty big commitment. So it's not just,
it's pretty huge. Yeah.
If you're listening to this in grade 12 and you're oh, Karen was on a club and she found it difficult to balance the schoolwork, well, I'm on 2 clubs. It's a whole nother ball game.
And I think that's a great point. Clubs in university, you're talking with so many new people, right? You're interacting with people that you've never worked with, people that are a lot more heterogeneous than what you're used to in a high school, in a typical high school setting. So you do get the chance to sort of work with so many new faces and so on, and you get to pick up those skills, which are very, very important when you go into internships and so on. And this isn't to deter people from joining clubs. I think it's a great great sort of entry point into making friends and so on.
I think also adding to Deep's point as well, definitely in high school, I think the big difference was I was in a bunch of clubs in high school as well. Like I was like president and like for like my student council, and I did district student advisory council as well. So I had those going at the same time, and they were nowhere as near as hard as the councils or like the clubs I had to lead during my time in university, mostly because I think you're working with bigger teams and you're working with bigger budgets. So then you have to think about how you actually want to spend your money and strategically like plan that throughout the year. And like for things like a conference, like you're bringing in like 200 people, like, really large scale events. So I think it's just, there's a bit more pressure just due to like the scale of things. It takes a bit more time. Mm-hmm.
Speaking on like, I guess the scale of things, I know that high schools offer co-op programs, and obviously Sauder does as well, but to a larger scale. So what are your thoughts on Sauder's co-op program? Maybe you've experienced it yourself.
I haven't taken a co-op in my 5 years there. Predominantly, that's just because I found it more useful to find something that interested me more. But I think it's a good program to have going on, especially for those that are out of province or out of that are coming into school. It's really helpful in. So essentially what they do is, they'll pair you up with a mentor, will give you the right skills and sort of attributes that you need to succeed, and sort of get internships and get jobs, when you're in business school. So I think it's a good program. I think there's definitely scope for more improvement there. Overall, I'd say definitely look into co-op as an option if they're, struggling to find a job elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. I think I have a kind of similar opinion to Deep. I'm actually in the co-op program, but personally, I think that I think there's a couple of different cases, right? Like I have a lot of friends like not in the co-op program that I've seen get great internships. So I definitely don't think it's necessary if you're looking for like specific internships. I do think it's beneficial for international students as well. I heard from some friends that they're like, oh, like they kind of help you with like your visa and like stuff like that, or like any of the complexity with like the contracts there. And I think starting out, they help me out with a couple of situations where you have multiple offers and you're like, in first year, you're like, what do I do with these? Or like, you're like, oh, how do I say no if there's something that I decide that I don't want to do? I think they can like walk you through that process. But I definitely think also the UBC co-op is a little bit more, I would say the majority of the jobs, of course, is based on the West Coast, which makes a lot of sense because I mean, UBC is based on the West Coast. But for someone that was looking specifically in like the CPG industry, which is like consumer packaged goods, which is predominantly based out of Toronto, I found a hard time finding those opportunities through co-op. And instead, I actually found a lot of my connections through programs like BMMP, which is like the brand management mentorship program at UBC. And they have mentors from like all these different CPGs that you basically like apply to get in. And it's like a boot camp style where they kind of train you to apply for these companies, and you build a lot of really great connections. Or like I have friends that went through PMF, which is like a portfolio management program. It's like finance is for finance students, and all my friends that went through that program went into iBanking. So I think co-op helps, but I don't think it's the only option. Like there's so much flexibility, you really could pick anything and like figure something out for yourself. I think it's kind of my thoughts on it.
On that note, like talking about how your friends got into all these different programs or whatever, I know that a lot of schools have their own reputation, like, Queens and Western leans towards consulting and finance, Schulich towards accounting, and, the same for every other school. Is there one big industry or a few main ones that UBC kind of leans towards the majority of students?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question because it really depends on who you ask, right? So, for example, here on the West Coast, our Sauder has some, good, really solid departments. I think one of them being accounting. A lot of students that go through accounting here do end up at, Big Four or Big Four Consulting or whatever. So I think that accounting is really strong here. The other thing, you know, at least from my experience, is global supply chain. I think that's a huge program that's, you know, really taken on development in recent years. You know, realizing the importance of supply chains and, you know, connecting those nodes between, like, you know, why are we not propelling talent through business school, and why are we not, you know, hiring younger people to work with us to find some solutions. So I think supply chain is really huge, and I think there's not a lot of schools that offer specific sort of supply chain programs, and so Sauder being a key one is definitely helpful.
I would say I agree with Deep. Like, I think coming in for sure, I think accounting's the big one though. Like for Sauder, like most people that go through accounting, they end up at like a big four firm, they like do their CPA. Like that seems the most common. I would say in terms of like areas such as marketing, you really, to be honest, you really have to like work really hard to build your network correctly, because while we have a lot of opportunities in Vancouver for like digital marketing or like within the agency space, I just think because so many large companies, they're headquartered out of Toronto, which is where marketing offices would also be based out of, you don't get to build the networks in the same way, or you really have to work like very hard to secure the right connections in order to work out of these big companies. So I would say like accounting probably, like from my impression. And also on top of Deep's supply chain program, the Bucks program seems really good. I've seen a lot of really great comp-sci and business students go work places. Like one of our good friends works at like Amazon now. We have people that I know work in like Firefox, like other places out in New York. So I think the comp-sci and business program is also really good. So yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
It's not that other specializations like finance or you know, operations, for example, it's not that they're bad by any means, but like they're perfectly, you know, they're good specializations. A lot of good talent comes out of it. Like Karen mentioned earlier, like the portfolio management fund, that's one of the top sort of funds that, you know, is student controlled, and you know, they're managing millions of dollars of money, you know, so that's important. So it's not to say that these are bad sort of options. It's just certain options are a little bit more sort of favored when it comes to, you know, UBC, their teaching style, as well as their sort of general sort of location in Canada, because accounting firms are huge in Vancouver, whereas, you know, Toronto is a little bit more sort of finance dependent. You know, you have your marketing industry there, you have your CPG, so you have a lot more industry focus. So I think you know, geography does play a huge role in that too.
I guess now that we've touched upon like academics and the industries and things like that people go into, more diving deep into like the culture of the school itself. Given your experience, how has like the social aspect of Sauder been in terms of like, you know, socializing as well as like parties and things like that for people to know as well?
Yeah, I think social aspect at Sauder is, I think it's great. You know, I was part of a team that organized like almost like a freshie event, like so for first years that are come into Sauder, and you know, you get a lot of experience, you get to meet a lot of people, and you know, socially, I think, you know, you get to expose to so much more than you've ever sort of imagined in high school, right? Like you just kind of learned there's a huge different world out there, people doing different sorts of jobs, people, you know, and people that you'd never meet on the street. And you know, you also kind of realize, you know, with the incredible sort of network that Sauder alumni have, you get to you know, really reach out to people that, you know, you're interested in. For example, you know, you could be like for example, you know, I remember, you know, when I was talking to Karen a little bit earlier, she helped connect me to someone that I was speaking to regarding, you know, a company. And so, you know, you have these connections that really form and really develop, and it's really strong at Sauder. I think socially, you know, in terms of when you first come in, there's going to be a lot of events you're going to go to, a lot of, you know, parties, galas, and so on. You know, you're really going to just, you know, have your world sort of blown to pieces as to what you're used to. But I think, you know, if you're someone that is a little bit outgoing, you know, likes to be in the company of other people, I think you'll thrive easily.
Yeah, I would say definitely. I would note one thing though, because I know like when you talk about like parties or socialization, like I would say I approach like party and socialization as kind of separate. Like if you talk about like the socialization aspect, I honestly think Sauder is really fantastic for that. Like you kind of are based out of one building for your first 2 years. So you'll really get to know pretty much everyone in your year. Like I used to be able to walk around the building and I'd be like, oh, hey. Like you would just like talk to everyone and you literally could sit down anywhere and just start talking to people and they'll be super nice. Like everyone's super easygoing. Like people are more than happy to chat. Like I think the socialization aspect is really big and people are very easygoing about that. And I think that's something I like about business in general, because I notice in other faculties, because it's so big and you have to go through different classes and all that, you don't really get the opportunity to talk to people within your classes or actually like really get to know people.
Right.
So I would say that's really big. And like, obviously if you join like clubs, you choose to like get involved, then you can build upon that even more. But on the party aspect, I would note that Sauder is a commuter school. Like there are places to live on campus and there's a lot of international students that choose to live on campus or people in their like first 2 years. Like I lived on campus or like near campus during my second year, and that will affect kind of your party life, I guess, like during that period of time. Like you can choose to be more involved in like we have events such as like Poits, which are like these nightly, like they happen at like in the evening and they're like drinking events like in the building basically. And then you'll like take a party bus afterwards to like go downtown and like everybody does that. And we have like other events as well, but like is kind of like, it depends on you. I think it's not like a party school. Like, I don't think I look at UBC, I'm like, wow, we're a party school. Like we're definitely not a party school. But like, if you like UBC does, I think we have the biggest Greeks. Don't quote me on this. Actually, I'm not sure. Maybe we should Google this, but we do have a pretty large Greek system as well. So like people that like do enjoy like the Greek life or something, they can choose to be involved with that if that's something you want to do, basically. So it's just, if you want to party, you can choose to party. But is it a party school? No, I would not say UBC is a party school. Yeah.
Okay, I guess a lot of people probably just like
cross it off.
Check that off now.
Cross it off. No party.
No party. Nah.
No, but I mean, you do gotta add though. If you're looking for a party, you will find one.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
You gotta be the person to go for it. I know, first, second year, you're young and you kind of, exploring the field, and you do sort of come across a party or two. So. There's definitely a party to be had if you're looking for one. So it is slightly different, but that's not to mention, like we do also have St. Patrick's Day. Like we also do celebrate, we also have, street parties and all that. So.
Okay. On that line, one question that we got a lot is like, how safe is the campus? How's the safety there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Campus, so I think UBC, I think they have like the largest campus in Canada. I think they do. Don't quote me on that, but I think they have the largest.
We'll fact check
campus.
all this afterwards.
Yeah. I think they have the largest campus in Canada, or the second largest, something like that. But with the size of the campus and its location, it's basically an isolated point in the west sort of end of Vancouver. And with its isolation point, it's predominantly just sort of UBC students that are going to be on campus most of the times. So that's, kind of a relief. You're with people that or people that are like you, which is good. They also have like this really good system where, they have these like huge sort of loopholes set up all throughout campus, and it's essentially just like an emergency button. So if you're at any point in the campus and anywhere, right, you just go and you just press it. And if you feel unsafe, somebody will speak to you, and there's cameras all around campus. Oh. So, it like safety at UBC is a really big deal. They take it very seriously. They also have, a lot of good services. Like I lived on campus, I think, for first 4 years, and they have a good system where, like, say if you're studying late, right, and you're at a library or something, what you can do is call up these people. I think it's WalkSafe or something like that. I don't know.
SafeWalk.
SafeWalk, yeah, SafeWalk. Yeah. You can call these people, and they can either drive you or walk you to your residence after you're done studying at night. And this is like, 1 a.m. if you're pulling an all-nighter or something, or 2 a.m. Right? And they walk you to your residence to make sure you're safe and all that, right? And so, I think safety is really big. That's one thing that I think we're very strong with.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, yeah, I feel the same way. Like overall, like I in second year, I used to study like all the time. So I would like go to class at like 9 a.m. I go back at like the last bus, which was like 12:08 or something, to like where I live, like kind of off campus. And I've never felt any issues with like feeling like unsafe on campus. But at the same time, it is really big. Like UBC is really big. And then it is right by like a forest that goes down to beach. So then if you're walking in the more forested areas, I probably wouldn't recommend that at night. There should be no reason, like there's no buildings right by it. So I don't see why you would be going through that area. But those areas, like obviously if you're like coming back from something, it could feel a little bit shady. But if you're throughout like the main areas of campus, I would say it's pretty safe. Like I at least haven't had a run-in or I don't know of like any of my friends that had any issues with that. But it helps to have things like Safe Walk and like the blue lights as well. Like I've used Safe Walk before. They'll like drive you like back to where you need to go. So it's definitely good to have.
And also to mention, this is all free, right? Like
Yeah.
this is like, so yeah.
I guess it's like the parties. Like if you want a party, you can find one. But if you want danger, you can also find it in like the forest and things like that, I'm guessing.
Yes, if you're actively searching danger, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to do that, then you can,
You'd be surprised though. There's because as Karen mentioned, there's a beach right on campus, right? So
Right.
literally, as you walk out of class, you could be at a beach. So you'd be, and I don't know if maybe your viewers or listeners want to hear this or not, but it is a nude beach. So it's like
tough.
So people are like, yeah. So it's a public beach, but
so accounting at 9 a.m. and then just drop trousers afterwards,
Yep, exactly. So something to keep in mind, if you're considering UBC.
I think it's actually interesting because like during the summers there too, it's like people all head down to the beach together, and there's like you'll see like different circles of people, and like we'll have friends with like your guitar and stuff, and it's just like groups of people hanging out, and you can literally just walk up to like any of them and just start chatting because you're like, yo, we're all just like hanging out on the beach, So it's like I would say UBC is like really laid back in that sense. Like you could just like talk to people, and most of the time people are like pretty welcoming. So yeah,
that sounds
man. Awesome. That sounds awesome.
Okay, yeah, but not to perpetrate the stereotype that all West Coast people are hippies. Like
Yeah.
we're not hippies. Right? Like we do study and we do work hard, but definitely very very laid back culture. There's a lot of activities happening all around campus all the time. You can join a bunch of like intramural leagues. You can join varsity teams. You can play rugby. I played rugby when I was at UBC. You can do a bunch of things, right? Like there's you can, if you're looking for something, it's there. Like trust me, it's there. Or you can create it, right? Like there's always you can if there's something for you, you can always create it. So yeah, I think in that sense, campus is really nice.
I guess this is more of a somber note now that we've talked about beaches and things like that. But obviously right now we can't really go to those because of COVID, right? So now that we've been, I think like a year and a little bit more during this pandemic, how do you think that the university, I guess, has adapted to COVID? Do you think it was like a smooth transition, or there was like a lot of trial and error type of thing? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I was at school I think around this time last year, right? And that's initially, when we heard like the COVID news come out and all that. I think the initial reaction by the university was a little bit late, in my opinion. I think, classes should have been going online a little bit faster than they were. I think there was I know I was comparing with, my peers in U of T or at Queens or whatever, and their classes went online like almost 2-3 weeks before we did, right? And at one point, Vancouver had a lot, or the BC had a lot of cases, and at one point they were higher than Ontario's too. So and we were just wondering, we're like, why are we not online? And it was at a pretty crucial time in our studies too. It was like you're just ending off your semester and you're going to finals, right? And it was like those last 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm like, why are we, we're a little slow in developing it. But I think over time, I think now, I can go to campus and, our campuses are open, like classes aren't going on, but, their stores are open, like the bookstore and all that, you can go into studying places, the residence halls are open, sorry. So I think now they've definitely adopted a good sort of rhythm, they're in it. And, online learning for us has gotten better, at least since what I remember it to be. So yeah, I think now they're in good rhythm. But initially, I think they were a little bit late to adopting.
Yeah, I would say I heard it was late to adopting too. I actually wasn't in school. I was way on a co-op term, but I would say even for the co-op, like for a lot of us in Toronto as well, like where I thought they should have sent out a response a little bit earlier than they did, because there were, especially with a lot of the younger students, where it's like, this is their first time in Toronto, and then like COVID hits, and then I just thought the response there was a little bit slower than it should have been. I would say it was a little bit delayed, especially when I was looking at all my East Coast friends and they're like, we're already online. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, like we're not. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
One can only imagine like the campus being open here. Like, I mean, your campus is just like full closed. Like, I think I drove by there once and I just like, kind of like stared out the window type of thing.
I haven't been I haven't been to campus since like March, which is fuck
that March.
Okay. On a note to kind of wrap it up, if you had to sum up your whole experience, what would be your favorite thing and your least favorite thing about the program?
Okay, I think favorite thing, okay, I'll say two things. First is the community, right? The community that I found, the friends that I have, and the connections that I've made over my time there. I think that's huge for me. And, I'm saying that honestly, like, I'm not getting paid by the university, right? So, and the second thing that I really liked, I enjoyed was the experience that I've gained and the internships I've had and the studies that I did, because I truly found that a lot of the courses I took were useful in what I'm doing now,
right.
Whether it's supply chain or whether it's accounting or whatever. So I think the experience and the community are two, really good things. In terms of negative attributes, let me think. How about when I come back to that?
I'm trying to think of the negative one too. I can't think of it off the top of my head.
These guys are paid.
I would say my positives are pretty similar to Deep. Like I think the community aspect, like my biggest joy from going through Sauder definitely was doing all the clubs, like being involved for like co-chairing like UBC Imprint, or like joining the academic team for JDC and like coaching for that afterwards. Like that was something I really, really enjoyed. And even though at the time there were moments where I was like, this is so painful, but like in hindsight, like the people I got to meet and the networks I got to build through my time in school, I think that was really big for me. I think that was a huge plus. And I think kind of going off I feel like I learned a lot in school, but I feel like I almost learned more from those experiences. Like, I think I learned the most about critical thinking through like doing like case competitions, or like learned the most about leadership through actually leading a team, or like doing different initiatives on my internship. I think for me, it was like the hands-on learning part that like I enjoyed the most. So yeah, kind of same thing, community, and also like the knowledge I kind of got to gain over the years. For the negative,
the beach was nude. That's all that she has to say about it. Honestly.
Really? Okay, this one's like a smaller one, but to kick us off, I would say like, okay, I don't think this will apply to everyone. Like, obviously, if you're moving out of province, this probably won't apply to you. But as a person that lived in Vancouver, like I lived in Burnaby, which is like a little bit further out. My commute would be like an hour and a half one way. So then 3 hours of my day for like all of first year was commuting. And that was really exhausting. Like in hindsight, like, because you would have class every day and you would be commuting every day. So that was like, I definitely did not enjoy that. But I can't think of anything else right now. I don't know, Deep. Bring it back to you.
I think like one negative that I can't think of, and it goes back to a discussion we were having a little bit earlier, is it has to do with sort of UBC is geography, and as to where it is in the West Coast, right? People from the East Coast, people from Toronto and Montreal and so on, they don't understand when people come from the West Coast to East. They don't sort of understand that transition, and in the sense that for us, it's not that jobs are difficult to find. Like Karen and I both have had like some really good co-ops and sort of opportunities, but it's not that they're difficult to find. It's just there's almost like a selective bias. Right. There's almost like when companies are recruiting, they're generally going to be recruiting from schools that they're more familiar with. And for companies on the East Coast, they're more familiar with schools that are on the East Coast. Right.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense. So I think the geography, as nice as Vancouver is, as nice as, the UBC campus is, that kind of plays at one of its negatives is I feel that, personally, the opportunities that we have at Sauder aren't like as fully fledged as some of the schools that are on the East Coast, and I'm talking specifically about like say finance, or I'm talking about like consulting, so some of these very, very specific fields, like even iBanking, right? Some of these very specific fields that people want to go into eventually, those opportunities are a little bit less than our kind of counterparts in Toronto or in Montreal and so on. That's one sort of negative I'd have.
I'm on the same page. I think Deep actually brought up a really good point. Like I think if you go to Sauder and you choose to work on the East Coast, your networking, like the amount of work you have to do in building your network, I think has to be more than someone would put in on the East Coast, because you guys have a lot of events or like companies coming in where they're like, hey, like we're looking for like marketers, or we're looking for like people like analysts or something like that. A lot of the marketers that I know that went into brand, similar to me, we all went to like QMAC, like we flew out for QMAC, like Queen's Marketing Conference. Like we really hard with like a lot of our mentors through BMMP, and like you really have to be willing to put yourself out there, and you have to be willing to network very hard. Like I think at one point I was networking like I could go up to like 5 times a week if it's like I'm really trying to get what I want. It's like, but you have to go to the extent if you want to land what someone on the East Coast would land, because you don't have the same you don't have the same school backing, and you also geographically are just somewhere else. So that's a big one.
You gotta really want it.
You gotta really want it. Yeah, for sure.
All right, I feel like that's a good piece of advice for like people going to UBC as well, that like gotta have that like drive, I think. I guess to just wrap it up now, hypothetically say you're going to first year again, you bump into yourself like in first year, like as a 4th or 5th year, and they're asking for advice. Like what is one piece of advice that you would give to yourself going into first year again?
I think for me, and I was actually thinking about it the other day, is to focus on the bigger picture. And as cliche as that sounds, right? When I was in first year, I would focus on like assignments that were worth like 1% or 2% of my grade, or like even like 0.5% of my grade, right? And I would spend like hours and hours working on this assignment, right? And like I'm thinking about it now, 5th year, I'm about to graduate, and I have a little job and everything, so it's sort of lined up. And I'm thinking about it, and it's like, what was that 0.5% of my grade? What would that have totally have done if I, and could I have used my time elsewhere? Could I have done more networking? Could I have flown out to Toronto to do something else? Or even taking a break, right?
Yeah.
That's really important for university students is to take a break too. So that's one thing, is to always look at the big picture, where you want to actually end up, what your goals are in life, and how what you can do to achieve them. Because I can assure you, as a first year, that 0.5% is not going to get you to that goal. That's not it. In high school we're very focused on tests and all that, which is true in university as well. Your midterms, your exams and everything is huge. But I think sort of move your mentality from I'm just going to go to university and that'll be the end all, to what do I want to do with my life. The stage is a lot grander, I think.
Right.
And so just focus on the bigger picture.
I think mine would probably be like also kind of like two points, where it's play to your strengths, And I would say also find a sense of balance so that everything is sustainable in the long run. So I ended up going into business. And I think a lot of the courses, like when I was first starting out, I was like, oh, like, I don't think I'm like as good as I was in high school, because it was just like a different level, you know, like everything's like so much harder. And then I was like, I think though, like early on, and I think this kind of worked out, but I was like, oh, I'm not as good as like the time I could spend like 1 hour studying, but then I could also spend 1 hour networking. So, and I found that for me, networking really served a greater purpose, where I was learning about the industry. I was talking to the right people. I was like building kind of my net, and I was kind of like also building my understanding of like business as a whole. So I saw more value in that. And that's where I chose to end up putting a lot more of my time. But for a long time too, in first year, I was stressing out because I was like, oh, like maybe I'm not cut out for this because I'm not doing well in like the academic areas, like especially when I was starting out. But then I think later on, I was like, oh, actually, like in hindsight, I was like, I'm glad I focused on my strengths, which was like talking to people. So I think just like play to what you're good at. And I think because that'll just be the rest of your life. You just like focus on what you're good at, and hopefully like you can cover the things you're like not as good at.
All right. That's some like good advice altogether. Like I feel like just for like any school, it's like I could take that advice and use it for myself as well as a second year. And on that note, I would like to thank both of you guys for being a part of the podcast and, you know, sharing your experiences as UBC students.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you guys for coming on and giving your takes on the program. For the listeners, this is part of our 7-episode series about Canadian business programs. So if you guys want to learn more about some other schools, maybe you're making a decision for where to go for university, be sure to check those out for more info and more takes on the programs.
And if you're interested in learning more about the world of business, maybe getting some life advice or just career advice, or just checking out and listening to stories from really cool people, check out our podcast. We're on Instagram and Spotify and everywhere else, wherever you get your podcast, at the Business Kids Podcast. Thank you, and have a good day.